Hello and welcome everybody. Valheim has been taking the Steam store by storm, selling over 3 million copies in just under the first month of being out on the Steam store. And many people have sunk many hours into this game, myself included, because it is freaking awesome. And along the way, I have learned 10 tips and tricks that I'm going to share with you today to make your time in Valheim just a little bit easier. Starting with tip number 1, destroying items does not lose materials. So if you build a wall and you knock it down, you get the materials back from it immediately. This is very handy for rearranging or correcting errors you may have made in building your bases, or if you need to move your different boxes and stuff around, you can destroy them, get the materials back, and then place it somewhere else. Tip number 2, all your tool and weapon repairs are free. They do not cost any materials to replace them. You just go over to a workbench, a forge, wherever you made that tool or weapon at, and hit the little repair button in the menu, and you will be able to repair them for free. No materials are required. Tip number 3, you can split item stacks in your inventory or in boxes or wherever you may have them stored by holding shift and left clicking on them and then moving the slider to the desired amount and then hitting OK and then placing them in an empty slot in your inventory or in your inventory box or wherever you want to place them. Very handy for moving stuff around and organizing. And then drag it onto the stack of the same item to stack them together. Tip number 4, if you want to take a nice pretty screenshot of the game or maybe show your friends this awesome fort you have made without all the clutter of the HUD, you can remove the HUD from the screen by holding Control and F3 together and it will remove it, and then you have a nice clean screen to screenshot. And I believe it's F12 in for Steam games to take a screenshot. A little bonus tip there. And then of course Control F3 to put the HUD back up. Tip number 5 is for those super early new players who have just gotten a fresh start here in Valheim. And I'm going to recommend building a bow as soon as you possibly can. It's a very useful tool, but another reason why I suggest building this as soon as possible is follows into tip number 6, is hunting all the deer and boar that you see around you, because getting the deer hides and the hide scraps from the boars can be a little bit of a tedious process. Sometimes you want that material right here and now to upgrade your armor or tools or whatever. Take a little bit of extra time. So if you're out running about and you see deer or boars, just shoot them and get that material. But if you miss, then carry on with what you were doing and maybe you'll see another one later. Tip number 7 is how to change your arrow types. You can do this by either opening your inventory and right-clicking on the arrow stack you desire to use, or you can put your different arrow stacks up on your hotkeys, and then with the inventory closed, you can hit your hotkeys to switch arrow types, such as 1, 2, 3, or 4. This is very handy for switching arrow types in the middle of battle. That way you don't have to open your inventory to change arrow types in case you run into different monsters and need different types of arrows. Tip number 8 comes in a little bit later. Once you have beaten the first boss, you are granted special powers. These powers are not passive, like I thought for so very long, until I bumped the F button key, which is the default key to use your powers, and then realized it is not a passive. So don't be like me. Hit that F button and use those special powers that you are granted. Tip number 9 is another tip for those very early players, and that is when you find flint, which if you don't know where to find flint, it's near bodies of water, rivers, lakes, the ocean is where you will find it. When you do find it, pick up a bunch of it because you're going to need a lot of it for upgrades early on, and you don't want to have to make a bunch of trips back and forth to the flint if your base isn't already near water like mine was, and I had to make a bajillion trips. Took forever. And my final tip for you today is kind of a two-parter. One is when you build your fort, you probably don't need to make it very big in the beginning because you're going to be moving around a lot, but I do recommend putting up a small wall around your fort so that you can defend yourself against enemies, because every once in a while the forest will awaken and raid your base, and it's a pain in the butt to fight them and not have a wall up. Part 2 of tip number 10 is when you are fighting stuff, sooner or later you're probably going to die and you lose all your crap where you died, which is where the enemies usually are still at. So when that happens, you're not going to want to craft a bunch of armor and new weapons and stuff because you probably lost all your crafting gear where you died as well. So what I recommend doing is keeping a spare set of armor and weapons back at your fort so that when you do die and respawn there, you can gear up, grab a little food so you have health, and then you can go back and go get your good gear from where you died, because then you can finish off those enemies that murdered you in cold blood, and then you don't have to spend a bunch of time crafting new weapons and stuff. You already have them there ready to go. So that is going to do it for today, folks. All 10 of my tips. I hope I was able to provide you with some useful information to make your time in Valheim a little bit better. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed the video and are looking forward to more of my guide content. I will be making a bunch more here in the near future because I've been playing the crap out of this game and absolutely loving it. So until next time, guys, you have a good one.